All right, raise your hand if you think you have an enemy currently and presently. All right, have you done anything recently to take care of them? Or, but you're thinking about it, right? All right, which brings me to our quote. It's far easier to forgive an enemy after you've gotten even with them. I think that definitely rings true for us here in this country because we're a very, let's say, vindictive and spiteful bunch. Our number one best-selling video games are all war-themed. We love movies based on an enemy, a protagonist and antagonist. One very time-consuming example I can think of is probably Marvel's comics. First, you had Thor. Thor is a god of another world whose mortal enemy turns out to be his own brother. So they go along the entire movie and they fight. They get along, but they fight because they just can't stand each other. They come from two different realms. Then, in the second movie, which isn't really a sequel to that movie, but kind of is the Avengers. Loki comes back. He wants revenge on his brother for pretty much exiling him from his own country or his own planet. And they go up back and forth, fighting, whatever. And this brings me to a movie that's actually going to come out this weekend. The third Thor, or second Thor, which is pretty much third in their story. They end up teaming up together. And I think that's very easy to team up together because he already beat him up 1,000 times. It's like, yeah, you're just my little brother now. You suck. So now they're taking on this new enemy. And I think that, actually that brings me to a quote that JFK once said. He says, you can forgive your enemies, but never forget their names. I think we tend to focus on the second part of that. We never forget our enemies, and we always have that in the back of our minds. No matter what we do, even if we say we forgive them, there's a part of us that wants to bring it up every now and again, like, do you remember what you did? Yeah, F off. But that just brings me to the point that sometimes forgiveness, and they say forgiveness is like godliness, if you can, it makes you that much greater of a person. And it is really hard to forgive someone, especially let's say if they're a relative, someone close to you, someone you put a lot of faith in. And I should think of another example, which brings me to a point of sports. Sports. A lot of teams have free agents, as for a lot of people that don't like sports. Every few years there's a free agent, and sometimes players decide to leave their teams. Tonight the Lakers face the Houston Rockets, who have a player named Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard played for the Lakers for 1 year. He left us, broke our hearts. We're resentful, we hate him, and he hates us just as much back. So for him, it's going to be a great game for him. He wants to face us. We're the enemy. He wants to get even with all the Laker fans that doubted him or his injuries or his ability to play in the big, bright lights of LA. And for him, it'll probably be a big turning stone for him because he'll face the Lakers, he'll get all those bad feelings out of the way, and then he can move on, rather than just move on to begin with. So that lets me say that go ahead and forgive your enemies, get it out of the way, but you can still hold grudges, it's fine.
No, you keep it. Don't give it back to me.
Okay. Anybody else want to do the second one?
All right, Romy, I thought that the audience survey and the rhetorical question were pretty good at the beginning. You've got a very clear statement of what your purpose is. You have no preview about how you're going to structure this. You just start talking. And I think that you realize that when you reach the end of your first really good example, and you go, oh yeah, I should have another example, shouldn't I? And it seems that's like a red flag going up suddenly. I just remembered I ought to have a plot, a plan for what I'm talking about. On the content, I thought that the first example worked really well. You told a good story. You didn't give away the ending. You explained that you kind of related it to something that's pretty topical. Apparently, you're going to that midnight Thor movie tonight, you know, that sort of thing. So that's good. Like I said, that section is all chronological because you tell the story in the two directions there, or in the one direction there. But when you get to your second example, it seems like, you know, it's just kind of disconnected from what was being talked about before. It's just an illustration, another illustration of that point. Presentation issues are really solid. For the most part, you're not having any difficulty here. You project well. There's good variety in your voice. It flows together pretty smoothly. Sometimes most of the time your gestures are good, but once in a while I notice that you're just kind of playing with the topic a little bit while you're speaking. It's almost like you've rolled it up in a little ball, and that's where your anxiety seems to be coming out. Other than that, the ending being a little abrupt and like the sudden drop in of that second section, it was really solid. All right, thank you. Vicky.